Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Hope you are having a great conference so far. And yeah, thank you for the attendance. Please, hello, we're starting. Thank you so much. So we are here today in this Path 2, and we are having this LATAM policy update with these great panelists. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Miguel López Delgado, and I'm Analytical Manager for the LATAM team at the Climate Action Reserve. And then, as I'm saying, today we are discussing about some policy updates in the LAC region, Latin American and Caribbean region. And so, yeah, we will be discussing about the development of policies and actions to leverage carbon markets across the region. So, yeah, for that, I'm delighted to have such great panelists today with me. First of all, I'm just giving you their names and their titles, and I'll give them a couple of minutes to introduce themselves. And so, first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Ana Moreno, who is a climate change analyst from the Ministry of Environment of Panama. Then we have Ricardo Torres Hernandez, Undersecretary of the Environment and the Secretariat of Sustainable Development of Querétaro. And then we have Pablo Gabutti, Secretary of Energy Transition at the Ministry of Infrastructure and Public Services of Córdoba. So please, Ana, could you start?
Sure. Hello, everybody, and thank you for being here. Thank you for inviting me also. It's a pleasure for me to be here sharing this panel also with you guys. So thank you, everyone. I know it's a hard session because it's the last one, so hopefully it's going to be interesting. My name is Ana Moreno. I work with the Ministry of Environment of Panama. I've been working for the last 5 years with the ministry under different projects. I have seen topics such as the NDC, the National Determined Contributions, also the National Program for the Management of GHG at organizational level, and most recently, a couple of years ago, I began working in the topic of carbon markets, specifically with the development of the national carbon market, and also it's linked to Article 6. So later on, you're going to hear a little bit more about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ana. Ricardo, can you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you so much, of course. Thank you for everybody and also for inviting me and the state of Querétaro to this forum. Unfortunately, at the last time I couldn't be in person, but I will thank you to Jennifer and Amy and all the team in Carbon Action Reserve to help me to stay at this way. So my name is Ricardo Torres. I am Undersecretary of Environment in the state of Querétaro. In the Sustainable Development Secretary, I've been a public servant for the last 20 years. All of this time I have been working in the environmental sector. I'm environmental engineer, chemical engineer, and also I have a master's degree in environmental sciences and a specialty in management, environmental management in mega cities. So I've been working in climate change for about 15 years, developing diverse kind of things like in inventories, energy balance, and developing many strategies to reduce or mitigate greenhouse gases emissions. I've been developing 2 subnational strategies in the state of Querétaro, programs to conduct the policy, all the climate policy in the state, and by now we are focusing in a local carbon market as a way to finance the implementation of our decarbonization pathways in the state. So we have the goal to reduce about 26% of our emissions by 2030 and 67% of our emissions on 2050, and be a carbon neutral state by 2060, more or less. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you, Ricardo. And Pablo, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again to the organization for this invitation. This is my second time here in this important event. Also a pleasure to be here with my fellow panelists, and thank to the audience that survived until now. You are the last survivors of the day. My name is Pablo Gabutti. I'm Secretary of Energy Transition from the province of Córdoba. Córdoba is a subnational state that is located in the central region of Argentina. It has the second largest economy and population after Buenos Aires, and its main sectors are agriculture, industry, and tourism. Our first experience with carbon markets started in late 2022 with a somewhat adventurous pilot experience that we did that luckily went pretty well, and that got us some visibility with many key players on the region. One of them was Eduardo from Mexico CO2, and we started collaborating with him, and through him with Climate Action Reserve, with Amy and the team. And we have been working first on the adaptation of the livestock protocol to Argentina to reduce methane emissions through biogas plants, and more recently with the landfill protocol, also with biogas. And I will be talking with further detail about that and some other policies that we're pushing on our climate strategy as a province and the current status of Argentina in this front in the next questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Pablo. So as you see, we have a representation of a national level and then a couple of subnational levels. So we are starting from the national level to understanding how is the situation in Panama. And so Panama is a pioneer in Central America in this carbon market world. And so they're taking significant steps towards their creation of their national carbon market. And this initiative is expected to be implemented as a dynamic tool to support the country's climate objectives, and foster, and the idea is to foster greater ambition in the fight against climate change. So this market includes actors in prioritized sectors such as energy, waste, or forestry, and it's structured mainly in three components that are the carbon footprint and reduction plan, then platform, then the national GHG emission offset system, and then the stock exchange. So we would be pleased if you could give us an idea, Anna, of the status of the program. How is the progressing? How are you progressing these days? How is the roadmap looking so far, and how you see or how you foresee the short-term movements or actions related to the development of this carbon market, or if you see long-term, any information you can give us on how is the national market these days, and if you can share any other relevant aspect or any news that you would like to share.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I was joking just entering the room that everyone is asking when are we gonna launch formally the market. We have been talking about it for a couple of years now. I myself asked the same question. We have encountered a couple of challenges. It's a complex topic, and we need to restructure a little bit the government, the Climate Change Directorate and the Ministry of Environment, so it takes a little bit a while. As I mentioned, Panama is developing a national market. It's based on an offsetting mechanism, so it's not like an ETS. It's more like buyers and sellers of carbon credits for national projects. It's been a long learning process for us. We have to create capacity first and then start making some decisions. So I repeat, we encounter a couple of challenges. So the government decided recently with all the international panorama, the Article 6, CORSIA, the VCM, the voluntary carbon market, the government decided that we need a roadmap. We needed a roadmap to define clear actions that we needed to move forward with the development of the market. So we start working with the Regional Collaboration Center of Latin America from the UNFCCC. They help us building this document. The document is ready. It hasn't been published formally yet because we are translating it to English also. So hopefully in a couple of weeks, we're going to have it in the webpage of the Ministry of Environment. The document is structured in 3 chapters. The first one reviews the national context. It reviews the legal framework that enables the creation of a market. Also, we review the policies that could impact this future market. And we also review the experience of the country of Panama in other international markets, such as the Clean Development Mechanism from Kyoto and the VCM, the Voluntary Carbon Market. We have a couple of projects, private projects that has been developed before we started talking about the national carbon market. And lastly, the first chapter reviews the commitments under our nationally determined contributions. As you know, now that we are interested in linking with Article 6 mechanisms, we need to be clear on what did we put in our own indices so we can start taking some decisions. The second chapter focuses on reviewing the market itself, how are we expecting that the market is going to work, and the 3 components that Miguel already mentioned. The progress with these components, the first one, the National GHG Management Program, is already operational, but it's voluntary for now. So the idea is that we are going to set a date in the roadmap when the program is going to pass from voluntary to mandatory. So the organizations will have to compensate through the buying carbon credits, national carbon credits. The second component is under development. We already have a national registry for projects. We haven't launched it because we still have to define the rules of participation and the processes. So we want to make public everything all together. And the last component is the Panamanian Carbon Exchange, and it's also under development. The third chapter is the roadmap itself. It includes actions, specific actions for the development of the market and the implementation of the market. These actions are divided into 3 categories. We categorize the actions following the priority, the time of implementation, and also the thematic. We have some actions directed to the structure of the program and others to human resources, for example. And I can mention, to finish my intervention, a couple of those actions that are priorities for the government. We have been working on an executive decree. We already have the executive decree. It still have to be reviewed by our legal team, and it still has to go through public consultation, but we have the decree written down. The decree is intended to define the steps and the actors that must go through the market. So hopefully this decree is going to help us to implement faster the market. And also we are discussing a little bit about the forest carbon ownership, so we can move ahead in that sector. We are now in a pause, but later I'm going to talk a little bit more, but that's another priority for the government now. And lastly, we also structure some phases. So we are trying to implement the market in a phase approach. So we're going to start with a pilot phase, and we're going to have 2 or 3 more phases till eventually we're going to have a full functioning market in a couple of years. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's amazing. You said that it's already 2 years you're working on that, starting from the creation of capacity, which is mainly truly important, to say in a way. And yeah, today you already have a decree written, so we're waiting on that to see how you publish it and how, if you receive any comment on that, and how finalize this decree, and at the end, how this decree could clarify the market and there in Panama, and yeah, and the very end, these phases, this pilot phase becomes into implementation phase, and then we see this market in Panama. So thank you for that, very interesting. And then we're going to talk with Ricardo. Ricardo, Mexico has currently like 11 subnational carbon taxes or schemes in place already. And so right now we know that additionally to that, there is a national ETS that it seems that is being I mean, right now it's kind of stuck in this pilot phase, but it seems that it's going to be implemented sooner than later. And so, yeah, coming back to Querétaro, Querétaro is leading the Mexico subnational carbon tax in a way. And it was created, if I'm not wrong, at the end of 2021. Sorry, and it's an hybrid scheme that includes the possibility of using offsets units to reduce the tax base, right? So those organizations that opt to offset or opt for the offset modality can do the offset, acquiring units from projects validated under international and national standards, right? For example, the CDM, Climate Action Reserve, among others. And so I'd like to ask you, how does a subnational government like Querétaro fit into the development of a national strategy? Where do you see the subnational government being positioned there in this generation of the national strategy, and how the changes in the climate change mitigation and adaptation policies at the national level, or the generation of national GHG emission trading, or the creating pricing mechanism, the national creating pricing mechanism, could affect the subnational government both positively or in a bad way or negatively?
Thank you so much, Miguel. Well, I think in a correct way to design an entire or an integral public policy, they don't affect if we can collaborate as a government between the different levels, federal level, state level, and even at a municipal level. Why? Because we have different parts of the same cake to complete. At the national level, as Anna said before in her explanation, especially in a country that is part of the United Nations framework, they have to develop an entire strategy focused in the reduction of the greenhouse gases emissions from the different sources in a country, and they have to conduct the way and the pathway to continually reduce the emissions by giving, for example, for instance, emission rights for the sources, and conduct an MRV system in which the different sources can reduce a specific amount every year during a period, and on the other hand, they can sell their over reductions in this way. At the subnational levels, we're more focused in the development of projects that can help the national government to conduct the national policy and present results for the national NDC in United Nations. So we are focusing on that. We have generated and created a tax system with many purposes, but three are the most important of them. First, because we need to develop capabilities among the industrial sector, agro-industrial sector, and mobility sector, where the local managers of all that kind of facilities can learn a lot of their emissions behavior over the last years, and how can they conduct reductions. Because many of the international companies have special environmental or climate departments, but they are not situated in the case of Mexico. Here in Mexico, these departments are in other parts of the world. So they are conducting for a policy among all the corporation, but they are not thinking especially in the facility that is located in Querétaro, for instance. So we are developing a strategy where they can, first of all, learn about their emissions and how can they reduce and be more efficient in their process. Second, we have created a tax that the main purpose is not to get the tax into the government, but all the taxes that at a certain level this purpose. And we are using this money to adapt our communities for the risk that we have to face over the next decades in a new climate reality. So the state needs money to prevent and to reduce the vulnerability of the society. And in third place, because we are funding by this local market the establishment and the development of strategies that can reduce or capture or carbon capture all in our region. Conducting a specific policy in the case of Querétaro related also with circular economy and this all kind of business that can reduce emissions, and at the same time we are generating economy in our local context in Mexico. So we are a complement of the national policy, and we are continuously adapting our policy depending of the new rules of a national policy. For instance, in Mexico, we are now with a new energy rules for the next 6 years. Our president, Claudia Sheinbaum, emits last week a different ordinance in terms of the way on which Mexico is gonna produce, transform, distribute energy coming from many different sources. So we now are in the necessity to adapt our policy, for instance, to adapt in the way to develop cogeneration electrical energy produced all across the country. So we're now working, for instance, with Eduardo Piquero that is in the public. I can see him from here in order to adapt our local carbon market to be in agreement with this new national policy. And when finally the SEMARNAT, our National Environmental Secretary, develops and implement an ETS in Mexico, we probably need more adaptations to our local policy in order to be complementary and in adaptation. So we are working very hard with them in order to develop a complementary strategy on which they can use our pilot example and also all the projects that we are developing in our region to complement the NDC reductions that they want to show and to share in the next COP. That's the way on what we see. We are a kind of complementation between or among all the government levels here in Mexico.
Yeah, thank you. So interesting to see that you're complementing the work of the national government, and that, you as a subnational state, you probably are more resilient and can adapt to the new changes in the ETS or
Yes.
wherever it is coming. So yeah, very interesting, and eager to see how these two mechanisms coexist, and yeah, how it's done, and the sectors that finally the ETS is covering and the subnational schemes are covering, and how they are, as I said, coexisting during the time, and if they finally, complement each other, or how is this gonna work. But yeah, it's interesting, and yeah, we're eager to see it. Then we are going to Argentina, Pablo, in Córdoba. So it could be said that lastly, recent government changes in Argentina, has been quite present in the international scene. Argentina has been recently, to say in a way, more present, and yeah, it seems that priorities at the national level today are not related to climate change or environment. They are not longer main priorities for the country, but however, the province of Córdoba is very active, and they're promoting actions to leverage climate action and climate mitigation and adaptation. In fact, you are developing policies in this regard at the provincial level, and aside from that, you have various initiatives or actions that are already implemented. And for example, you do have this voluntary carbon footprint registry, where at the provincial level, right, where GHG emission can be offsetted. And so, even though you have this carbon footprint registry, there are other initiatives, and just to say that the government of Córdoba is truly active in these regards, even though there are new changes within the national scene, right? So I would like to know how the changes in the national government structure could have influenced the provincial policy development or action at the provincial level for climate change mitigation and adaptation, or if, at the contrary, they have reinforced them in any form. And in addition, if you could give us a little idea on what's Córdoba proposed strategy to mitigate and adapt climate change, and what's Córdoba in these regards today.
I'm smiling because Argentina, man, finds always a way to keep things interesting. I mean, you can say many things about my country, but you cannot say that you're bored. Well, yeah, so I would say that now we have the typical bad news, good news situation. On the bad news side, the national government, as you said, has shown explicit disregard for its climate strategy, questioning its urgency and even floating around the idea of leaving the Paris Agreement, which, by the way, they haven't done yet. So that's interesting. But at the same time, on the good news, I would say last year in this same conference, I said that the greatest barrier for climate action and energy transition was as it is in any other sector across the board, was still, but less so, the severe economic crisis and the cyclical turbulences, and that creates a permanent state of uncertainty, and you cannot see more than 1 day or 2 days in the future. Nothing can be done in medium long term that way. So on that front, we are seeing good progress. There are already many months of steady inflation steadily decreasing. It is imminent that they complete the lift up of the foreign exchange restrictions, which, if done and done properly, will boost significantly the potential of investments in things like, for example, speaking of our sector, renewable generation, or, for example, in infrastructure. I've heard Ricardo mention the change of framework of electricity in Mexico or in Argentina. We have decades of uninvestment or deficit in investment in the high voltage lines, which are right now the main bottlenecks to add more power in renewables on the grid. So with this combination of things, on the one hand, the vacuum that the national government retiring itself for the climate discussion, but at the same time, an economy that looks is starting to stabilize and getting better days. Córdoba is perfectly positioned to take some leverage of this situation and position itself as a leader of the region, or at least of the country, with some other provinces and some other subnational states that we are collaborating with to both create initiatives and policies that show the way locally on the climate front, but also, which is very important, and you're going to hear more than once from me say today, do it in a way that is competitive and sustainable also from an economic point of view, not just environmentally, which I think they are not mutually exclusive. It is not a trade-off if you do it in a smart way. So just to be like an overview of example of this type of policies that I'm referring to, we are now, and we think we can make even a much bigger impact this year, number one in the ranking of distributed renewable electricity generation with comparison with all the other provinces. We do believe that this is a very strategic policy to be leading because not only reduces emissions, but also decentralizes generation and creates a paradigm shift where the user stops being just a passive role that consumes electricity and pays at the end of the month, but instead starts being a protagonist, generates part of his own energy, and if he has any surpluses, he can inject it into the grid and get some retribution for that. I think the future is going to be probably a combination of that with the storage and some type of pricing that helps utilities not go completely disrupted about that. So that is an interesting challenge. And then as a second example, we have also a framework for sustainable transportation. We do believe that sooner or later we will see electrification of transportation, but because of the grid, because of the restrictions of supply and all that I mentioned before, if we only wait for the electric vehicles, we will have a problem, but also we are not going to make it in on time. So that's why we also have a synergy with higher cuts of biofuel blends, specifically bioethanol and biodiesel, as a way to bridge that gap and take advantage of the sector, because Córdoba has an agriculture sector, and also that these technologies, if these biofuels in the right cuts, don't even require a change a modification on the cars of the conventional motors. So we are promoting production and consumption of biofuels as well. And lastly, on this first overview, we are, of course, being very active. Me being here is part of that on the collaboration internationally. We have been part of the Under2 coalition of the climate group, which is a large network of subnational states. We also co-founded, proudly co-founders of the SMAC, Subnational Methane Action Coalition, which California spearheaded under the leadership of Chair Leanne Randolph, who was speaking here yesterday, with California, but also with Querétaro and another 14 subnational states. Well, I mentioned already our collaboration with Mexico too, with whom we are organizing the third edition of the Argentina Carbon Forum, which for the first time is going to be in Córdoba, so everybody invited to assist is 28th and 29th of July. And with CAR, of course, I already said that we adapted the livestock protocol. We ended that with the board giving the approval on the vote late 2024. And not even half of 2025, and we already have our first project listed, which is, for us was super good news because it shows there is true traction, and I'm confident that we will have more projects coming soon to that protocol. I'm very enthusiastic also to work on the landfill and many more later. So that's my first overview, and we can go into deeper detail probably in the next question.
Thank you so much, Pablo. It's nice to see that there is a bad, but there is always a good. And in this good, you can boost the potential of renewable energy or sustainable transportation, and that's great. And it's also interesting to see that it's not everything about carbon markets. There are other options, that there are other solutions, or there are other policies that it can be developed, and therefore we can also advance in the mitigation of the climate change. And so, yeah, it's also great to see that Córdoba is that active there in Argentina, and I hope that neighbors around can mirror you in a way, or at least learn a bit of your experience. And yeah, it's really interesting and great. Keep on doing this. Great job. So then we're coming back to Panama, Ana. And so you were mentioning something before when you were talking. So one of the recent actions that the government is carrying out to bring, in a way, clarity to the national carbon market is this temporary moratorium on the carbon forestry projects, and which is ordered by Ambiente, right? And this moratorium establishes that Ambiente has the right to evaluate and approve the development of the forestry carbon projects at the national level, right? So this is something that was considered, even though during the development of the forestry protocol that the Climate Action Reserve has for Panama, and all the projects in this protocol needs to seek this approval. So in a way, we just count on this thanks to the collaboration of the Ministry of the Environment of Panama, who was collaborating in this development of the protocol. So yeah, I would like to understand which are the decisions behind, I mean, what are the reasons, better to say, for this decision to stop projects, I mean, yeah, what do you want to solve with this break, if there is anything to solve there? And how does Ambiente approach this evaluation of forestry project? How are you doing it? And just lastly, what are the differences to consider in between the project types, if there are? I mean, in between projects all in forestry, and if possible, what's the status of this moratorium, and what are we expecting in the short term?
Yeah, that's a very popular question back in Panama. I receive like 10 mails per day asking about that moratorium. Yes, Panama established a moratorium past November 2024. As you may know, Panama is a forestry country. The most part of our territory is covered by forests. And usually those forests are in indigenous communities areas. So it's a very important topic for us. I know Amy, for sure, she remembers. And it has sparked a lot of interest because when we started with the market, the most popular sector was forestry. Immediately, people came to the ministry asking for the forestry project. I have a forest in my backyard. Can I earn some money tomorrow? So it's been a process of explaining a little bit, and we, from the ministry, has realized that we have some challenge, and there are some existent gaps in the legal framework for the development of carbon projects, but specifically for the forestry sector. So the objective of this moratorium was to create a more robust and clear legal framework, and also to establish more clear processes for people that are trying to develop a forestry project in the country. The idea for us is that people can take a good advantage of the forest, but following some processes that are more transparent for the market, national and international. We are trying to solve some problems, and of course we have had some experiences with some project developers. We have learned about them not because they came to the ministry, but because they came directly to the communities, to the indigenous communities, and months later or even years later, the indigenous communities come to the ministry like, hey, what happened here? And we are like, we didn't even knew that this was happening. So they go directly to the communities, and they sell an idea, they sign something, and then they left, and nobody knows what happened with the money and with the territory and so on. The thing is, they work in the VCM with any standard, and those standards usually are for regional use or global use and are not fitted to the country. I'm gonna do some marketing here for our protocol for forestry projects that we develop with CAR, because we have a process with them. We had a process with them. They went to Panama. They got together with the forestry actors, and we review our legal framework, our forestry legal framework. I'm not talking about the market framework because we don't have yet. We are constructing that framework. But we do have laws that establish some processes for everyone who's trying to develop a project, carbon or not carbon in there. And since there are some gaps, we do not have explicit in a law that states that everyone who wants to develop a forestry carbon project must do this and this. They go there and say, you do not have any law regarding carbon markets, so we can do whatever we want. So that's the idea. The idea is to protect a little bit our own communities. People maybe at the beginning, they didn't understood the idea. People got kind of mad. But I think now they understand because they have seen some examples in Panama and outside Panama of what's happening. So we're trying actually to protect them, to create transparent processes so they can, evaluate the opportunities that somebody else offers to them. Additionally, we also want to establish some complementary processes. We want to have some national safeguard system, also a benefit sharing system for the projects developed in Panama, and also a grievance mechanism so people can contact directly the ministry if they notice something is wrong with the project or if they have been hurt by the project in any form. And regarding the type of projects, the moratorium covers all type of projects. This goes from reforestation to avoided deforestation, and also we include mangroves because they are part of our forestry sector, of course. So all type of projects, forestry projects, must apply the rules that we're gonna present to the public. We are hoping this moratorium ends by this year, eventually in this year. Hopefully, I don't know, starting the second half, hopefully. I say hopefully because we propose the dates, but stuff happens, especially in government, and maybe we cannot give like a clear date, but I think it's gonna be this year because people are pushing. To have an answer now because they want to know what's going to happen with the project I had, with the idea that I had. So I think we're going to have results this year. As I mentioned before, we are talking now with the Forestry Directorate about carbon ownership. That is part of the issue. We need to resolve that to establish who owns the carbon, who can benefit from that carbon in a legal way. So that's step one, and we are making some progress in there, slowly but steady. And also we have to finish this moratorium with a participatory process. We have to make some roundtables. We have to go to the provinces, to the comarcas, the indigenous people territories, so they can learn about it, understand, and maybe give us some feedback, since they are the ones who are experiencing the problems, right? So yeah, that's the process, that's the idea. That's definitely gonna happen this year. So hopefully, if I come next year, I can give you better news about it.
Great, thank you. It's nice to see, the motto of this, trying to help communities and try to bring capacities for the communities to understand these type of markets and these type of projects and not being, scammed in a way. And so, interesting to see that also you're thinking on a specific benefit sharing mechanism, grievance mechanism, etc. So this is helping for sure communities to have a better result out of these type of projects. And we're eager to see this moratorium being finished. And I understand it's not an easy business. And of course, having these calls like, I want a project tomorrow, I want the money tomorrow, it may be a bit difficult, but it's nice to see that the government is willing to go in comarcas, to go in the rural areas, wherever it is, to bring this capacity and to educate people for them to be up to date and not having bad results out of these projects, which this is what we don't want. So thank you. Coming back to Ricardo. Ricardo, Yeah, I'm still curious about the interactions in between the potential new ETS in Mexico and the carbon tax that you have there in Querétaro. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm thinking on the different sectors that there may be and thinking on those systems working simultaneously. I like to know, I mean, if you envision any ways that the new ETS, that the national level could affect the essential of an offsetting mechanism at the project level. I mean, is if they offer to polluters a level in between the different jurisdiction of carbon pricing instruments, or if how do national definitions of important concepts like additionality, like eligibility, or among other concepts, important concepts there for projects, for carbon projects, may vary coming from the ETS level, from the national level, and may change. You were saying that you're adapting, you're resilient as a subnational state. And so I'd like to see how you envision this moment in which we may have two different crediting pricing instruments working at the same time, probably in different sectors, coexisting. I'm not so sure. Maybe you can give us more information about it and how you envision it. Oh, sorry, Ricardo, you're mute. Sorry.
Sorry. Thank you so much. As I said before, we are a complement of the national policy or national strategy. By now, where we don't have a national strategy, and we were in Mexico, we were waiting for this at least 10 years, we decided to go ahead with a subnational policy, trying to implement different kind of projects that can help us nationally and locally reduce greenhouse gases emissions. If finally Semarnat release a national project that we are not quite sure right now because we are facing a very complex scenario at the national level, but if finally Semarnat release a national policy, our constitution in Mexico and our normativity and ordinance says that the environmental policy in Mexico is a national interest. So we are concurrent in terms of environmental policy with the federal government. So they have the priority in the definitions and in the establishment of all that kind of concepts that you have mentioned, and we need to adapt that. We cannot be contradictory because it's part of our of the Mexico federal constitution. We need to be complementary of them. So in this case, we are going to adapt these definitions, and we are going to adapt our system if it's possible. I think it could be very possible to be in the same way with them, using the same definitions and the same vocabulary, as a way to say, that the federal government, in order to avoid confusion among the private sector all across the country, because some of the companies that have facilities installed in Querétaro have other kind of facilities in other part of the country, and there are the same companies. So we need to use the same terms and use the same concepts among. So in the case of the ATS, we are gonna accept immediately all the reductions coming from the ATS and reduce the tax base in our tax system immediately. In the same way we reduce if they compensate with us and with the projects that we have created. And for instance, if the federal government government accept some projects or some standards or some what else, we are going to accept immediately in our local strategy. So on that way, we can continue having integrality and integrity all among the country. That's the way in which we are planning to work together.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Again, it's nice to see that you're resilient, then you adapt, and then, yeah, I hope the definitions at the national level, it matches your definitions, but if not, you're willing to adapt, which is great, and then, yeah, to have the same terminology at the national level in order not to have any confusion. Yeah, that's great. So we don't have much time, but we're finalizing the round of questions now, and then we are giving time for the audience to ask questions. I would like to keep on asking you, Pablo, around the initiatives that the government of Córdoba is having, but this time I'll try to focus more on the voluntary carbon market. You have this carbon footprint registry, so voluntary for corporates, I think, and then can offset their carbon footprint. So I'd like to know how is the provincial government working to bring this carbon offset market alive, and how you work with the supply and demand in order to make it possible, or how is the government encouraging the development of quality carbon projects, if you're doing it, and which project types are you more interested in, or which are the sectors are you more interested in from the government?
Yeah. Well, the operational framework we've been working and will keep working now for the rest of the term is a structure around clear, credible, and user-friendly instruments that attack both emissions mitigation and offsetting. So on the mitigation front, we are trying to design and create instruments for each scope. So, for example, just to give you an example, I mentioned the biofuel interest of our government, and to practice what we're preaching, we started by migrating the entire public fleet to biofuels with those higher cuts, and we created an observatory that keeps track of the liters consumed, the emissions reduced, and all that with a small but highly specialized team that many of you already know, which are counted with this hand, but they're leveraged on AI and other tricks. With methodologies and guidelines and international standards, we are soon to launch that same type of tracking and also certification to the private users that start using biofuels. And that will have a double end. For once, to give them the opportunity to show mitigation of scope 1, and also to get access to some fiscal incentives that we are giving. So we are like pushing on the both incentives that could be interesting for a public that is maybe not specialized on carbon markets. Same thing with electricity, to keep it short. Scope 2, generation of renewables and consumption, who generates, but also who gets to claim the attributes of the clean energy that might or not be the same person that generated it. So we have a very interesting project with the Inter-American Bank development with blockchain and tokenization to keep track on all that, which is a larger story, but longer story, but let's leave it at that. Is one way to guarantee verificability, traceability, and avoid double counting. And on scope 3, we are also, because we are the Ministry of Infrastructure, we are working with environmental product declarations to see to monitor and to measure and verify the emissions through the supply chain. So that's on mitigation front. And on the carbon credits for offsetting, of course, our main interest and very high in the priorities is to strengthen our relationship with CAR, but also for those local projects that might not have the eligibility, or because the barrier of access is too high either in cost or in whatever reason. For very specific type of projects, we are also creating some local certifications, so that, for example, if some biodigester that is new but is not strictly using livestock but other type of organics that we want to promote as well, maybe that one cannot go to CAR, but it can get a local certification. Of course, it's not going to have the same prestige, but it's a way to include them as well. And on the demand and supply side, supply, well, that's the main sector, biogas. We are also exploring afforestation, so we're gonna probably try to attempt replicate part of the success with that. But we learned that to get some robust and truly resilient market, you cannot rely completely on external demand. You have to create some local demand. So our approach, because of the circumstances for Argentina that are very hard to promote a carbon tax, we went for I think it's quite an innovative mechanism, which is the public tendering process. Because we have a very high budget public works in our ministry, in the tendering process, we have created first a carbon footprint, a standardized calculator that took us a year gathering information about type of projects and list of materials and updated emissions factors and all that, with collaboration of the Chamber of Construction, which they didn't resist. On the contrary, they helped. And with that, we have with some verification process, and which I'm not going to go in detail, but we're leveraging all the processes that already existed for the payment of the public works to add this new layer that when they are reporting many things that they already had to report before, now they are adding partial measurements of carbon footprint until they finalize the project and they have the full carbon footprint measurement. And from that, then they have to offset. So that's getting some traction on the demand side as well. And of course, all this has been with permanent interaction with the key sectors of the Córdoba economy, agriculture, industry, chambers, associations, construction, urban developers, tourism, universities. We're very, very active. So these climate policies have a widespread adaptation across the entire economic provinces and not just a niche market. So that's an overview of our voluntary carbon market efforts.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think we are running out of time, but I would like to give it time to the audience if you like to ask any question. I think even we lost Ricardo. Yeah, Jose, please.
Yes, I have a question for Ana. You mentioned that there's a moratorium, but I understood that is only for the forestry sector or only, or for example, technology projects too?
Thank you for the question. No, in fact, it's just for the forestry sector because it's a little bit more complex. And we have some existing law in the forestry sector that needs to be complied with. And we discovered that they were not complying with anything. So it was a little bit more urgent. And also, most of the offer, the projects that come to the ministry asking or showing interest in participating of the market, like 98% are forestry projects. So that's our focus right now. I'm not saying eventually we will not have to adapt or create specific processes for other sectors, but for now we are focusing on forestry. That is the most urgent for the country.
Great, thank you. So thank you so much. Thank you so much to you, Ricardo. Thank you in there. And
wherever you are.
Yeah, wherever you are. Yeah, I think we can give them a big applause. And thank you so much for this.
Thank you for the same.